Welcome to the deep dive. I'm joined by Ian Boyd. What's going on, Ian?
Summertime blues here. All my children are here with me. House.
You're like Mother Goose.
I heard this friend of mine was with a bunch of kind of crunchy moms in the area, and they drove by the school and they're like, "Look at the prison with all the children trapped there," because they're all like homeschool advocates.
Right.
And I was like, if I had been there, I'd been like, yeah, thank God. Can you imagine if they were out amongst us?
Yeah, there's a famous line a historian wrote, I forgot the name, who said, every generation we're invaded by barbarians. They're called children.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that some other time. A typical deep dive aside. Hey, for those of you who don't mind our little brief asides before we get to that great content talking about everything, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like this video. Subscribe to the channel. Let us hear from you in the comments. We'd love to read your comments. And of course, we want to see you over at Inside Texas as well. That's where Ian and I write when we're not D-level local YouTube stars. All right, Ian, there was something that came out that I think was of interest to us and probably to other Longhorn fans from PFF, Pro Football Focus. And what they did was ranked what they believe to be the top returning position groups, this time secondary. They've already ranked the Texas linebackers as the #1 returning unit. I didn't have a problem with that. I can't pretend to know every unit in college football exhaustively, but I feel like we're pretty loaded there for reasons we've discussed before.
Yeah.
They just released a rankings of the secondaries, and they say Texas is #1, numero uno. That's impressive. But we're going to talk about whether that's accurate, or even if it is accurate, if it doesn't mean we've got some big questions to answer in the secondary.
Yeah. Exactly.
Do we have some big questions to answer in the secondary?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Is it possible Texas ends up with the #1 secondary? Sure. It's possible. I think me and you would have both said if we were gonna rank teams by the level of uncertainty around them, we would not have Texas #1. Right?
Yeah, I think we'll discuss this a little bit, and then we'll get into Texas specifically, because this is really just a vehicle for us to talk about Texas and what we think might be some of the best options in our secondary. Because I'll tell you what, Ian, I'm not sure June 11th or whatever it is, 2025, I'm not sure our coaches know. And I think they're going to figure some of this out in the fall, or possibly even during the season. So I'll leave you with that cliffhanger. One of the reasons they cite Texas as the #1 returning secondary, two features predominantly that they cite, but also a third that I think is going to be equally important. That's their #4 returning safety, Michael Taaffe, #6 cornerback in Malik Muhammad. Taaffe was the 4th most valuable safety last year, according to PFF's wins above average metric. So when people say that Mr. Taaffe is a jag, quite literally, he is not. We've got evidence. We've got statistical proof that he is not. And then, of course, Malik Muhammad, we're hoping that he takes a big leap from last year to this year. And then finally, I think the third guy that we shouldn't forget, particularly if an Inside Texas reader or you listen to the deep dive, is Jelani McDonald. Junior is a player that both Ian and I are very high on. And I don't think Texas fans fully appreciate just how much he did play last year. He logged 477 snaps after not playing a ton early in the season. And I think he was effectively a starter by the end of the year. And I think that's what he's going to be counted on to do this year. And I think he could be a star. The question is, where are we going to play him? And what about a star, all caps. So the question is, where are we going to play him? And where are we going to find our other corner? And what are we going to do at star? So that's what we're going to tackle. But this was a vehicle to talk about this. I think another thing that they really like, PFF, was they liked our depth. We've been recruiting really well in the secondary.
Yeah.
I think we believe that we're a year away from a bunch of young guys unleashing. And of course, there's Derek Williams, who went out fairly early in the season with a knee injury. We hope he's back. Even at the time, though, it's interesting to note he was a co-starter. He was basically splitting reps before his injury. He was not the clear starter by himself. So what do you think about this? And if you want, we can touch on some other teams. I don't really care, but we could just use this as a vehicle to talk about us.
Let me just give a quick critique of PFF, which is that they grade guys based on their execution of their assignment.
Yeah.
So you get results that are misleading. For instance, one year PFF did this article that was like top 10 offensive lines in college football. And included very high in their top 10 was Appalachian State, because that particular year they were just mowing people down in outside zone.
And they returned a bunch of starters.
I think it was in the season, so it was even better than that.
Oh, okay.
It was like in-season results, but it was like, yeah, Appalachian State is mowing down the Sun Belt with outside zone. If these guys played in the SEC, would they be a top 10 offense in the SEC?
Would their 5'11", 300-pound guard fare well against Byron Murphy?
And then one of the other top 10 teams, offensive lines, was Washington State. And this is when Mike Leach was there.
Let me guess. They didn't give up many sacks.
They didn't give up very many sacks. Yeah.
Because the ball's out.
Because the ball's out. They're just be a passable, coherent unit and get in the way for 2 or 3 seconds, and we'll do the rest.
Okay, so I understand where you're coming from, but if I'm a skeptic, I'd say, Ian, Appalachian State and the SEC is not a useful comparison for what you're talking about with Taaffe. Taaffe is in and of himself a good player, demonstrably. There is no massive athletic gap. And similarly, we're running a pretty conventional defense that everybody else is doing in college football. We run a nickel. We have different coverages. It's not like this guy didn't have any sort of responsibilities at all. So you can't make the Mike Leach systemic argument. So what is the basis of your argument? Are you saying that there were certain players that took on an inordinate load last year?
Yeah, not to the same extreme as Washington State, but Jahdae Barron was the top corner. He took the top assignment and he erased it. Andrew Makuba was one of the best coverage safeties in the country.
Yes.
He could play man coverage on a slot. He'd been doing it for years at Clemson. He was also extraordinarily gifted in zone, at being in the right spots. That interception he had against Carson Beck had NFL draft gurus absolutely salivating in the month of March or whenever, when they were doing those breakdowns. They had this deal Texas did last year where they had like 4 corners on the field at all times in nickel, because Gilbo was basically a corner and Makuba was like a corner. And then they could shield Taaffe from coverage and then just let him do what he does best, which is be smart and tough and physical. And so the context is very important. You know, they have Texas has a bunch of guys that are really good. They have a bunch of guys that can easily be effective in the right scheme. But you always need the balance of skill sets to build a 5-man unit that's dominant. You need the right balance of skill sets. And so they just lost the best cover corner in the country and one of the best cover safeties in the country. And then the PFF thing is like, look at the great run defense numbers on the returning safeties. So that's not why they were number 1 last year. Then they were number 1 last year because of the balance. And I don't know if they can recreate it or not. Maybe. Yeah,
I think that's the interesting thing, is not to sound all Moneyball cliche here, but you recreate it in the aggregate.
Yes.
What you want to do is certainly have some special and gifted players, and I think we might have a couple. But I think you also want to play a lot of guys, and maybe you want to play some matchups depending on the opponent, Ian.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about breaking down our roster. But before we do that, I want to talk about the guy who never breaks down on the job, Gabe Winslow. You can reach him at 832-557-1095. He is the returning PFF #1 ranked mortgage guy. I just made that up, and that's probably a financial crime, but I'm not worried about it because I know that he's going to treat you really well if you dial those digits, or if you go to his website, mortgagesbygabe.com. Gabe's great at what he does. Over 20 years in the industry. He's been on every side of this industry, and he's a broker. He does not work for Big Bank USA. And what that means is he's going to get your deal and he's going to shop it to 60 different lenders and let them fight. And guess what? The market right now, not a lot of people doing mortgages. Check rates. So guess how hard those lenders are fighting to do a mortgage. Gabe knows how to pit these people against each other and work out the best deal on your behalf. Give him a call, find out why. So many people are delighted that they worked with Gabe. 832-557-1095. All right. Let's break this down, man. So we are looking at a lot of different options and a lot of different bodies. So I'm going to start with the toughest question.
This always makes me nervous. This is my rule in the offseason is the more guys you have to name to have an answer at a position, the less likely it is that you have the answer.
I've been writing this for 20 years, that when people listed 9 different tight end options or 14 guys at receiver, I was like, you just told me that we don't have a dominant studs. Now, in this case, I do think there's a high level of talent throughout the group. It's just a question of readiness and fit. I think that's the more appropriate discussion for this group because very clearly, Sark has remade Texas football. There's not a lot of hangers on anymore at Texas. Those guys get cleansed. And in fact, we had a big cleansing last year, Ian, as you'll recall, which is what allowed the green shoots of this new secondary in 2024 to spring forth and blossom. So let's talk about how this could happen with this group. I'm going to ask, and let's tackle the hardest job arguably in the secondary, star, the nickel position.
Yeah.
Who do we want here? What traits do we want? Would we better just keeping Jalen Gilbo there and getting above average play at star? Or should we move him out to corner and find a new star who might actually be more impactful, more dynamic, has a different body, might be better against the run, or different guys might be better against the pass, who might have more foot speed or quickness than Jalen Gilbo? What do we want to do with this position? Because it's vital.
I think my ideal corner is a quick, not necessarily elite fast, but elite quick processor, physical player. So a guy who's like really smart. He's impactful if he's involved in like blowing up a screen or blitzing the edge or fitting the run. And then he has the short area quickness laterally to cover ground, like out to the hash mark and maybe from the hash marks to the numbers, You
said cornerback. You mean nickel?
I'm talking about nickel. I don't know what I said.
Okay. Yeah, you accidentally said corner. So I
got lost there for a minute. I do want
those traits also useful for a corner, but
I want your really smart corner who may or may not have amazing long speed down the field.
Yeah.
But can jump routes and be physical. I want your Derek Strait type corner. That's my ideal nickel. There are other ways to do it, but for me, that's usually the best.
Yeah, what's interesting is you're asked to do a lot of different things against many offenses. You're asked to basically be an edge defender against the run. So you better be strong enough and tough enough to do that. You're also really close to the ball. You're the quickest guy on your defense that's close to the ball and the line of scrimmage on most snaps. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So do you have the ability to recognize something and go attack it instantly?
Uh-huh.
Jahdae Barron particularly was great at that as a nickel. Great recognition, and he would just fire. He was confident. Like, I know what's happening. I recognize that play. This is going to be a negative 3-yard play. I'm not just going to sit there and watch this develop.
Yeah.
There's also the need to physically hold up. You've got to be robust. So Derek Strait, probably 5'10", over 200 pounds. Like kind of a physical, mean little dude. And very good handsy outside corner in the OU old cover 2 system. But in modern football, he'd be your ideal nickel, partly because he was very good at change of direction.
Yeah.
You're not as worried, typically, depends on the coverages, about your star just getting beat over the top. Typically, a safety is going to be helping him out. And I think we're going to have good safeties. So who do we want at this position on the roster? We talked about our ideals. Is it Jelani McDonald? Is it Derek Williams? Is it Jalen Gilbo? There's even talk of, hey, Williams and McDonald would be an incredible lengthy safeties, both back there who have good change of direction and a lot of length. Could we play Michael Taff at star? I mean, there's a lot of options. What do you want to do? What do you think we're going to do?
I don't know if there's an ideal guy who's ready yet. I don't know if there's that like super twitchy, thick, robust corner type on the roster. Like maybe Wardell Mack, who played there in the spring and was the main guy. I don't know if he's ready. Is this our whole list here? Some of these young guys could potentially, like Grayson Littleton was well reviewed there.
What about Jonah Williams?
Jonah Williams, I think, is too big for what I described.
You think he's going to have trouble with a 5'8", 170-pound slot?
Yeah.
Okay.
We haven't seen just a ton of Jonah Williams yet, but that's what I would assume. Now, they could go another route, Paul, where they play more of like a big safety in that spot, like a box safety that is going to be better at the things you described. Where like, hey, you're close to the action. We need you to get in there fast. Play more two deep coverages again.
Yep.
And then have that guy be covered over the top by Taff or Derek Williams. And then you are that would definitely work.
So Jelani,
or you could get away with Taff in that instance, I think. You could also play Williams. Williams may be the best cover corner there. You could maybe get away with Jonah Williams if you did it like that.
why do you think Derek Williams is a better pure coverage guy if we had to man up than, say, Jelani?
I guess because I've seen him do it. He did it.
You've seen him do it from safety.
Yeah, but I would see him. He would drop down from safety over a slot sometimes when they blitzed in 2023. You remember the game where Houston kept torching the blitz, where the safety would have to come down and cover the slot, and the only one of the Texas safeties that did a passable job at it and wasn't completely destroyed was Derek Williams. He's got some unreal quickness. The problem with using him at the nickel is, one, I have no idea what he's like athletically after his injury and if he's like really there yet.
Yeah.
And secondly, we just described how it's like the ultimate hybrid position. You have to be a master of 100 trades, and he hasn't been repping it.
Well, so I think you have to pick your poison here.
Yeah.
I think you got to play a guy that you love his coverage ability and you figure it out on the run, or you love the guy's size and his physicality what he brings. Jelani McDonald as a blitzer would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Particularly in concert with Anthony Hill, Trey Moore, like all these different dudes just coming, like Colin Simmons, running a twist with Colin Simmons. Like that's a lot of quickness for an offensive line and a running back to handle, right? So I think you pick your poison there and then just understand you got to cover him up. And you may want to play matchups. I mean, I'm not trying to be wishy-washy here. I just think that there's certain teams, if their slot is a 5'8", 170-pound guy that catches 8 balls a game on little quick lateral nonsense, maybe Jelani's not your guy that game at nickel. Maybe you start him at safety.
Yeah. Or dime or whatever.
You know a guy who physically and mentally would fit the requirements of this? Jordan Johnson-Rubel.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of a tough, scrappy little guy. He's physically robust. I don't know if he's fast enough. I don't know like his quickness or foot speed, but he just seems like a guy that would get the position pretty quickly.
I think he did. And they moved him to some other spots because he may be a guy that's like Taff, where he could theoretically play all three safety-ish spots plus dime and learn them and be really good and help direct everybody else. But I don't know if he has the athleticism or not to be like, your Earl Thomas, Michael Griffin, Andrew Makuba, like star level guy.
Yeah.
All but maybe one of those he could be that good at.
So Star, we don't know, but I suspect that we need to pick our poison and then fashion the defense accordingly. I also think you just got to get your best 5 guys out there. So don't pick someone who's average but fits the traditional requirements of a position because it's aesthetically pleasing to you. You got to get the best guys out there and then play a defense accordingly. Does that make sense?
Well, I tend to think if you have the right fits, that you can end up with the sum that's greater than the whole of the parts.
Yeah.
So I would push back a little bit in that regard.
Well, my point is right now we can identify the perfect star, can we?
No.
So you got to pick your poison.
Yeah.
I go with a more dynamic athlete over a guy who looks more like a traditional nickel, but isn't very good yet.
I think that's the right path for them to take, but I'm nervous about a couple things. I'm nervous about ending up with 5 guys that are good in run support.
Yeah.
And no one is that good in coverage. And I'm worried about, hey, Jelani McDonald at star with Williams behind him, and you're in great shape when you play quarters.
Yeah.
But Dwayne Akina and P. Kwiatkowski and who's the guy that we think might actually be in charge? The linebackers coach. Nansen. Maybe they just don't want to play quarters. And they're like, no, we're going to play these guys and we're going to keep playing the single high stuff because it was really good last year.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting tension. All right, so star, we're not exactly sure. We think there's a lot of candidates. Whatever candidate we pick there is going to influence the larger defense and the larger coverage scheme.
Yes.
Let's talk about corner.
Yeah.
Manny Muhammad will go to sort of our number 1 corner, or maybe we'll have co-equal corners. Who knows? Again, we don't lack for possibilities out there, but they've decided they want to move Jalen Gilbo out there. I have questions because I don't think Jalen Gilbo has great pure foot speed.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you'll see him take an angle on a ball carrier or a receiver, and it doesn't get there. And I don't think it was a bad angle necessarily. I think it was he couldn't make it up. He couldn't make up the corner. So I'm concerned about that. I'm not concerned about sort of his seniority, his experience, headiness. I think he's got decent quickness. But I'm kind of wondering, is he the best candidate out there? And I guess we're going to find out. But Kobe Black looks to be more physically impressive, at least on the hoof, but he's inexperienced. So what are we looking at that other cornerback position?
I mean, that's basically it.
No, there's other guys.
Well, there's a bunch of guys that might be amazing down the line, but you figure the top 2 is going to come from those 3 names: Gilbo, Muhammad, and Black. You kind of skip.
You hear stuff about Warren Roberson a lot, about physically being impressive.
That's true.
He seemed to be a penalty magnet on special teams last year, but I don't think that, you don't write him off based on that, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if he could make himself felt in the competition this fall.
I think Phillips, when he first arrived, got some good buzz as well.
Cade Phillips,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have. I mean, all these guys are theoretical. Muhammad was really good last year, but also mostly untested until Clemson, and then he got tested and he got attacked.
Yeah.
And Clemson was like, this is it. This is how we win the game, and they went after him. Gilbo, I share your concerns. I would think that just pure experience and some of his short area quickness, maybe he can just make it work. But he's not like a he's probably just not going to be an elite corner because of athleticism. It's just doesn't quite seem to be there. And then Black, he seems like he might be close, but it has to happen. And we have not gotten the indication. Like, I think if Black was just taking off, we'd be hearing it, right? It'd be like, just forget it. He's going to play. And we haven't heard that yet. Offseason's not over. So all that makes me nervous because you basically have three guys that when we last saw them were not elite corners. And one of them needs to be an elite corner if Texas is going to be the number one secondary.
Yeah.
Right. So what do you think?
Well, you saw this dynamic with Michigan last year where they had their dominant corner on one side and then the guy that was more gettable.
Yeah.
And teams that were basically able to get the gettable had success, or at least were smart enough to be like, we don't fear any player. We're going to balance like Sark is like, why would we throw at Will Johnson? You're not a part of this game. And he attacked their linebackers and he attacked that corner, right? There are fewer teams on our schedule than you think who will just be able to isolate a player and like exploit him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So that is the thing to keep in mind as well. But if you want to be an elite secondary, as you said, you don't want to have any, who's the duck, right? Like who's the guy that you find to target? Oregon players probably hate that expression, but yeah, I just think that's going to be an interesting aspect. And then, as you said at the very beginning of this, Andrew Makuba and Jahdae Barron probably bore an inordinate burden in that defense last year in terms of coverages. And that allowed other guys to specialize and be really good at it.
Yeah.
But one thing I will say, Jelani McDonald, he might be a star this year and be gone to the NFL at the end of this year. I think he's got that level of ability. I think it's just a question of where he's played. One of the things that's really interesting about him is, you can look at grades and all that stuff for PFF, and he had a really high tackling grade. But tackling applies not just to the run game, that's also the pass game.
Yep.
I counted it up, and I believe, I'll have to check PFF after this, he finished the season with one missed tackle. And well, given his number of snaps, that's really good. I mean, it's normal for even like good players to have 12 by the end of the year, right? Or 15 or whatever.
He had 477 snaps. And
one missed tackle. We can live with that.
Yeah. But how many? I'm going to look up real quick how many he had. Where are you?
Maybe he had an extra one in the playoffs.
33 tackles.
Yeah. So not bad. Andrew Makuba, as much as we loved him, when you come in like a missile, you're going to miss a tackle here and there, and he missed a few. But we'll take that net benefit. The other thing that we have to consider, Ian, is we didn't see a spring game.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen a lot of these guys since January of this year. One thing that's pretty clear about Steve Sarkisian's teams is a lot happens to guys in 9 months.
Yes.
And, go back, and I challenge people. I'm writing my Thinking Texas Football preview right now. And I posit the idea of like, hey, go back right now in a time machine to 1 year ago, exactly today, and read all the commentary on our secondary. We lost all these starters. What's going on? We're bringing in this Makuba guy. He had one interception the whole time he started at Clemson. He's just a jag. We have a walk-on starting. Like, what is going on, right? Jahdae Barron got smoked at nickel late in the year. He can't play corner. Like, that was the wisdom, right? Because in 2023, the Texas defense was ranked 49th in the country in passing efficiency defense.
Yeah.
And they lost 2.5 starters in the portal, not to graduation. We found out later that, of course, that they were encouraged to leave in the portal. But we went from 49th in passing efficiency to 2nd in the country in passing efficiency. Defense. Some of that was the opponent mix, but a big part of it was the secondary got good. And it happened because of new faces, not because of experience. True?
Yeah. I actually did anticipate a lot of that personally. And I'm not sure if I anticipate the same thing this year. But I mean, so much of this just depends on what is McDonald this year.
Williams.
Is Williams back healthy?
Yep.
And then, I mean, if Manny Muhammad makes a leap, then that answers a lot of questions. Everything gets easier when you have an ace corner that's just like, he's fine over there. He's going to take that guy away. And now everything else we do can be oriented around shoring up any other weak spots.
Agreed. The other part worth mentioning is we think we're going to have a very good pass rush.
Yeah.
That's going to help these guys, but also, can we hold up in that intermediate short game such that teams can't just short circuit our pass rush? And I love PK, but a criticism I've had of him, and I think I'll always have of him to some degree. Degree is the important part of that sentence. He will allow teams to throw the ball short and intermediate, even when he has a good pass rush, because he's not always confident that it will get there if we try to make people hold the ball and like jump on that short stuff.
He prefers bend don't break. He prefers single high, so everybody's matched up and nobody's running free.
Yep.
But you can give everybody a little bit of cushion. That's his like comfort zone. Which actually maybe for this secondary, that may not be a bad fit because we're not sure if these guys are up for challenging routes up and down the field. Something I wrote the other week that I'm anticipating is that people are going to get really mad when they see Colin Simmons drop into coverage. And when they see our pass rush be thwarted by like just quick release access throws underneath.
Yeah, it's going to be frustrating when their opposing quarterback at halftime is 11 of 16 for 87 yards.
Yeah.
And we remember the 3rd and 2s he converted and like little drives he got to the 50.
Yep.
And we're like, come on, like, let's shut it. Like, come on, and it's like, hey man, there's 6 points on the board. Like they kicked 2 field goals. So yeah, it can be frustrating, but not giving up big stuff over the top is good defensive football, right?
Yeah.
So there'll be an interesting tension here, and I'm curious to see what we do. But I think a lot of it is on that opposite corner from Malik, and Malik, of course, leveling up, and then how we figure out Star, how we figure out the nickel. Because I don't doubt we can play a lot of good safeties who, if you back them up and let them look at the football from distance, they're going to make good stuff happen.
It's funny. I feel like we just vacillate every year, back and forth. Texas needs to play more 2 high. Texas needs to play more single high. This year, if they were really good at 2 high, that'd be great.
Yeah.
At least until the playoffs. If they could just like stop the run from 2 high, that would short circuit all the toughest opponents on the schedule. And then you figure out Clemson when you get there, if you have to, if you even have to beat them, which, may not.
Well, let me ask you this question, and brought up by our estimable producer. How's the coaching change going to affect this with Dwayne Aquina? Obviously, he's got a long history of development, not just at Texas, but at other schools. But, I think he's a guy who likes certain stuff and philosophies. But you say that at Arizona, he teamed up very capably with Nansen, who like to do all sorts of stuff, like drop 8 and, play layered zones and all sorts of stuff. So is there a natural compatibility already there from their time together? Or is there going to be some conflict if Aquino wants to, man up across the board and let's zero blitz?
It might be that.
Okay.
I think Aquino might be like, we're going to man up. We got this. And then in 2026, we see the rewards of all his work when all the young guys are like aces and they can just lock you up every position. They have a ace man coverage guy on you. But I don't know if that's going to work in 2025 if they try that.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be interesting tension. It's always curious, but I would say that there's a history of this, of Akina and Nansen working together. I mean, I wasn't aware of any tension there. So obviously there might be some malleability there that he's seen this. There's some different ways to skin the cat.
He also, like in 2011, when Manny Diaz first came in, Diaz was like, we got to play quarters too high. And Aquino was like, yeah, I got freshman Quandre Diggs. I got like sophomore Carrington Bindum or whoever. I think you're right. Let's do it. And they were awesome. But then the next year he was like, all right, enough of that. Now we play man.
Yeah, true. Be interesting.
That was also under Mac Brown's feckless leadership, late stage Mac, and over 10 years ago. So
agreed. All right, so we'll talk about, are there any other secondaries that you have your eye on nationally, or even that you're aware of in the SEC that you think will be better or give Texas a run for their money?
I think we both agree that Alabama, the other four that are on this graphic, stand out to us as being formidable. Clemson returns both corners from last year, which is alarming, I would say, for everybody that has to play them. Safety and nickel for them is going to be more interesting. That's where they have question marks there. But just when you have Avion Terrell, and then I think Lampkin was the other guy's name, it's such a great start. Alabama last year had all these talented dudes that were all like freshmen and youngsters and didn't know the new scheme yet.
Yeah, they were very incoherent, but talented.
Yeah.
If I was picking upside secondary, and this might be co-equal to Alabama surprising, potentially under DeBoer, I'd say the big upside secondary is Alabama.
Yeah.
Georgia?
Yeah. Oregon is really tricky because Oregon has a bunch of first and second year guys that were really highly recruited. And sometimes those guys, when they play that far off the ball, just come in and are great immediately. And sometimes they're not. I don't know which is which for Oregon's guys yet, but they have a lot of talent.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting landscape. I think the SEC, as you predict, will have a bunch of good secondaries, but it'll be a question of cohesion. And, sometimes you can fool these guys in the SEC particularly because there's a premium on athleticism and not always ball awareness. When you can get them young, you can hurt them.
Yeah.
But be some very interesting challenges for Texas, not only in our secondary, but the secondaries we face. All right, Ian, any parting thoughts as we head into the uncertainty of the next, 2 and some change months before we get our secondary unveiled?
The secondaries Texas faces this year have a lot more challenges ahead of them than Texas's secondary against those teams' offenses.
Yes.
The draw is good for Texas in this regard.
I agree. Agreed. All right. Well, with this rousing agreement to finalize our deep dive, I want to thank you. Please make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like this video. Make sure we hear from you in the comments. We'll see you guys over at Inside Texas. Come join. Ian, thanks a lot. This has been the deep dive.